Are you ready to shatter ceilings, to redefine what's possible in your life and business? Then welcome to the Beyond Woman podcast, where we dive deep into the heart of empowerment, the art of crafting a lifestyle business that truly serves you, and the tools to unlock your most authentic, powerful self. I'm your host, Jacqueline Walker Johnson, and here we celebrate the women who are rewriting the rules, the visionaries carving their own paths, and the experts who are sharing their hard-won wisdom to guide us all. Join us for intimate conversations with women who are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Women who have the expertise and the sheer grit to empower you to step into your limitless potential. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and transformed. This is the Beyond Woman podcast. Let's begin. Today's episode of the Beyond Woman Conversations is brought to you by Sarah Vaughan Collections. Timeless beauty, elegantly curated. Elevate your beauty with Sarah Vaughan Collections, offering a curated selection of luxury cosmetics and personalized gift baskets designed for elegant women over 40. Whether you're looking for the perfect high-end makeup product or a bespoke gift for a special occasion, we bring sophistication and customization right to your fingertips. Shop now at www.sarahvaughan.com. Sarah Vaughan Collections, for the woman who knows her worth. Today we're talking to Rese Carter, a board-certified nutritionist, author, speaker, and competitive bodybuilder specializing in perimenopause, metabolic health, and functional nutrition. With over a decade of experience in the health and wellness space, she began her training in 2011 at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, later earning a Master of Science in Nutrition and Integrative Health from Maryland University of Integrative Health. Rese has held leadership roles in the wellness industry, including serving as vice president in a clean medicine company and senior vice president at a food as medicine startup, where she helped shape innovative approaches to personalized health. She also worked with the Army Wellness Center in Landstuhl, Germany, coaching, well, we're hoping we're saying that correctly, coaching soldiers and their families on nutrition and performance optimization. Now, as the founder, CEO, and chief clinical officer of Rese Carter Lifestyles, she is redefining women's health by blending science-backed nutrition with holistic strategies. As the author of Perimenopause Unlocked, Rese is passionate about educating and empowering women to navigate midlife with strength, resilience, and confidence. Through her clinical work, speaking engagements, and writing, she is on a mission to transform the way women approach hormonal health and metabolic well-being. Welcome, Rese. How are you? How is everything? I mean, you're no stranger to the Beyond Woman platform because you have contributed to our magazine as well as you have been a panelist on one of our virtual conferences before. So, like I said, you are no stranger, but I know a lot of things have been happening with you. You have made a lot of changes since we last connected. So I don't know if you want to share some of the changes that has happened in your life and what's going on and, just bring us up to date.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's a pleasure to always join the Beyond Women movement. Like, you guys are amazing. Thank you for all that you've done so far. Lots of changes. Well, from moving from Jamaica to El Paso to Germany to the United States, right? So that's in terms of changes over the last, I want to say 7-8 years. I've tinkered in the corporate space, right? So I feel like every time I come on these things, I'm like, I just quit my corporate job. So I would want to say that that's another big shift in my life where, I am solo, completely independent, recently reestablished my Rese Carter lifestyle brand. I'm about to launch a supplement company. This is the first, Wow. You're the first person that's hearing that. So we're very close to launch. I feel comfortable talking about that. I did a bodybuilding competition last year, so I'm now adding that to my repertoire, right? And how could I forget? Like, shameless plug, I wrote a book. And we're going to talk about some of the things in this book today, right? So
Exactly.
Unlocked, it's something near and dear to my heart. So I think that's what's up.
Awesome. Yes, I should have mentioned that bodybuilding, we're on the same page where that is concerned and that's a good thing. So today we are talking about perimenopause and the Caribbean woman actually breaking the silence on our changing bodies. And, last night I was thinking about you and thinking about the podcast, and I was like, Rese is like Halle Berry to America. Rese is that to the Caribbean.
And I had her haircut, back in the day. So yes.
Right. So let's start off with a little bit of statistics, and you can correct me, but did you know that 90% of women experience menopause symptoms, but they don't recognize them as hormonal changes? Studies show that Black women, including Caribbean women, of course, tend to experience more intense symptoms. I don't know why. Yet the conversations around menopause remain somewhat, I wouldn't say it's on hush hush, but we're not talking enough about it, in our culture. Or I would say that when we have off days or we experience some kind of symptom, our male counterparts, they don't understand. Sometimes we ourselves don't even understand as women. So I believe that this topic is very important for us to add our voice to it. And it really is us providing support or information and, like I said, empowering us with the knowledge that we need to traverse these menopause and perimenopause roads, right? So I don't know if you want to start off by sharing. I know you just showed your book, which I believe it is about perimenopause. I don't know if you want to talk really about how you came to be so passionate about this area. Was it your own challenges that led you to begin to champion women in this area? What was it?
Well, that's a great question. So let's start with one thing. I want to backtrack a little bit. So just for the audience, we're going to talk about perimenopause. That's a period of a 10-year period before you hit menopause. And menopause, ladies, is simply one day, right? So when somebody says you're menopausal, all it simply means is that your ovary function has now shut down and you're no longer having a menstrual cycle. And I'm careful to make sure of that distinction as we get into it, because you'll understand as we go further why it's important to understand the terminologies. Now, in terms of my passion, actually, when I completed my master's in Nutrition and Integrative Health, my research was on perimenopause. I had to pick something, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I had no clue. You're talking about many years ago, right? I had no clue what it was. I just saw a topic in the bucket, and I'm like, I'm going to research on this topic. And I did my research, wrote the paper, forgot about it. Fast forward a couple of years later, I started to focus on gut health and hormone balance, right? And if you do anything about hormone balance, you're going to come up on perimenopause, because perimenopause is really a phase in your life, right? Just like you have puberty, adolescence. But what it is, when you think about it, is that phase of your life is riddled with hormonal imbalances. So that's where it kind of started for me. And as I start, because earlier in my career, like in my early 20s and 30s, I was seeing women who were perimenopausal, and the application that I was using it was okay. It got them to a certain level. But looking back, if you worked with me and you were perimenopausal, I want to apologize for my lack of knowledge at the time. Right? So, so that's kind of what got me on the journey. And I've had my own experience, as a woman in my 40s. I've had my own experiences that I said, no, we really need to talk about this, So, for example, one of the things that happened to me in my recent as 2 years ago, was being in a restaurant, and it was my husband's birthday. And I tasted his food. So I generally don't eat shellfish. He was having lobster, I was having fish. And he's like, babe, just taste a little piece. And within, I want to say 3 or 4 minutes or less of tasting his food, I went into anaphylactic shock.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knows, Jackie, how I came out of it, but I know how I came out of it by the grace of God. Because I remember when I could not breathe, in my mind, I was saying to the Lord, help me to get out of this. I cannot die. I'm not ready to go. Right. And I literally could see everything just flashing around me. My husband said that he saw my eyes. He could only see the white, like my eyes did something that I don't know. Right. And that really led me to write the book, because women, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. When you get into your 40s, because your hormones become chaotic, people like to say decrease, but really what it is chaos, because it's doing this. It's not a straight shot of up or down. It's more, ebbs and flows. When that happens, it directly impacts your, your allergy, your histamine levels, sorry, because estrogen as a hormone impacts your histamine levels. And in my case, mine was off the chain, off the charts. So it sent me into anaphylactic. Afterwards, I went to the doctor. They tested me for everything. I've never had an allergy in my life. As of today, I am now what you call histamine intolerant. So I have to be careful of certain foods that I used to love to eat. I now have allergies, right? And a lot of women develop allergies. I know we can't go down the rabbit hole, so I'm going to pause there so you can take the mic back. But I'm telling you,
But it's interesting how you spoke about the allergy, because I remember, and I even know, because I didn't go to the doctor for it. Mm-hmm. I went through a period of just sneezing. It was ridiculous. And when I say a period, I'm talking about a year. I kid you not.
Wow.
I had no, what you call the barrier, the hair that you need to.
Yes.
In my nostrils, that's how bad it was. Everything came out because I was constantly sneezing, and then it stopped all of a sudden. So I am pretty sure that that had something to do with what we're talking about today. And I'm glad that we started talking about the symptoms or some of the signs, because that's exactly what I wanted to lead into. Our first segment is going to be dealing with understanding perimenopause, right? So what are some of the early signs of perimenopause that women should look out for? And what are some of the lesser known symptoms that Caribbean women might not associate with perimenopause? Maybe like that sneezing episode that I had.
Right. How much time do we have? Let me tell you something, ladies. I cover some of these things in my book, right? And on a serious note, one of the things that I've noticed, like one of the most common ones that I hear from my patients, and I see maybe 4 to 5 women daily in my private practice, and I also consult for another company, right? And the biggest thing that I'm seeing is weight gain. That's the first red flag. You're eating your same diet, you're having the same lifestyle basically, and all of a sudden you're 20 pounds heavier. That actually happened to me. I know for the people out there that know me would be shocked, because everybody knows that I'm the fit queen. I've always been fit. But I promise you, in 2022, I was 20 pounds heavier than I am now. And my body, the distribution, and you can be heavy, but not, it's more muscles. In that case, it literally was body fat. And no matter what I did, I worked out. I was, working out like crazy. Couldn't figure it out. The other thing is sleep disturbances, right? That is a huge red flag where, you're waking up like at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's also to do with cortisol, right? Because your body is under stress. For some people, it's joint pains, like, and of course, the quintessential hot flashes, mood swings. Those are the more common ones, right? Now, the lesser known evil, some people have dental issues. Hello. Some people get dental issues. Some people start developing gut issues. And the things that I'm seeing the most now is the frozen shoulder, like joint issues. So a lot of women develop severe joint issues and labrum tears. So like in your shoulder, in your hips, your feet, excessive pain in the mornings that they wake up and they say the joints are really stiff. Okay, and we have the solution. And to be honest with you, some of these I've gone through. I just, after the anaphylactic, my next thing that I found out that I was walking around with a tear in my right hip, right? And I've been lifting heavy weights and all of that. And I only discovered that because, in my bodybuilding journey, I'm pushing hard and I'm like, no, something is wrong. Finally, after x-rays and whatever, and I pushed for an MRI, I figured it out. And here's the thing that I want to caution women to. When you go to the doctor, insist and let them know you're in your 40s. Because, for example, if you go to an orthopedic surgeon, in my case, he's in his early 30s, he's not relating back to the fact that I'm a perimenopausal woman. So he's just looking at the case in isolation. And this is why it's important to go to an expert, guys. I can't tell you the amount of people that I've helped because they're going to their doctors about, individual things and them not putting the pieces together to recognize that some of these symptoms are actually connected to the fact that you're in perimenopause.
Yeah. I do believe that. But I didn't hear you mention the emotional aspect of it.
Sorry, I didn't mention the rage. I didn't mention the uncontrollable crying that some women go into and they can't understand what is going on. Like I had a patient tell me that yesterday, like she was just crying for no reason at all, not recognizing depression, the anxiety. A lot of women go through depression. And also that's connected to the fact that their bodies are changing. And we have not touched the sexual health part because that is a whole monster by itself. The loss of your libido, your husband who you used to, be attracted to, all of a sudden he's the enemy because you're like, I do not want to do this because one of the more common things is vaginal dryness. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but that's also something that is real for a lot of women, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, all connected to the fact that your hormones are doing their own thing, and what a lot of women don't understand is that estrogen plays a role, but testosterone, when it comes to like sexual health, they're recognizing that, when women, for example, get into doing a hormone replacement, right? Testosterone is just as important to replace as estrogen, for example, and progesterone. But that's a whole other conversation, right? But the emotional part of it, to me, is the hidden one, right? If you think back, for example, some of our mothers, when we were growing up, we used to call them miserable. They weren't miserable. They were going through this emotional shift. Their bodies were changing. Their hormones are out of whack. They feel pressured. They're not as resilient to handle some of the pressures of life. Do you know women in their 40s, we're not as resilient as we think. And that is why some of us quit our corporate jobs in our 40s because we can no longer deal with, things that are not so pleasant. We can't grin and bear anymore. It's because we don't have as much control over our emotions.
I mean, I don't want to shout out, oh my goodness. I can attest to that. Like, yeah, I want to talk about the cultural and the societal aspect of it. Why do you think that there is such a silence around perimenopause? And you touched on, I feel like the emotional aspect is even greater than the physical aspect. I feel like it weighs us down because, for example, women who are in a marriage, as you mentioned, your libido is non-existent, so to speak. And you are left wondering why, what is happening to me, it doesn't sit well with you. And so I'm saying, why do you think that there is such a silence as it relates to that aspect of perimenopause or perimenopause in general? Why is it that we don't talk about it more?
That's a great question. I don't think anybody has the full answer to why we don't talk about it, but my guess is taboo, right? Think about culturally how we are as a Caribbean people. So when I moved to Germany, for example, and I went into the sauna, women just stripped down and went in. Okay? And I'm like, clutching my pearls. Like, I am not going in no sauna, butt naked with no other woman that I do not know. Right. And it took me a long time. Like, they were so liberated and so free. In the Caribbean, we are taught to be a little bit more modest in terms of covering ourselves, and then there's the aspect of the desirability, right, of culture, of how people, for example, when a man starts to gray, we're like, oh my God, he's a silver fox.
Hello.
What happens when a woman starts to gray? It's almost like we discard her to the side, and it's cultural, and to be honest, I don't think it's just in the Caribbean, but that aspect of it definitely in terms of the taboo of talking about it. I also think it's a lack of knowledge, to be honest with you, because when I look back, for example, even though this is not perimenopause, but when I had my daughter, I had postpartum depression. And, I thought I was going crazy. Nobody knew at that time. You're talking about 18 years ago compared to now. So there are lots of things that we're evolving on. Thanks to social media, we're able to have a conversation, right? I'm sitting in Atlanta, you're in Jamaica, and we're able to have this conversation. So I think some of it stems around the whole taboo of not thinking that we can be open about certain things. And some of it stems from cultural, some of it stems from really, truly just lack of knowledge. And that's where you and I come in, because I hope this conversation reaches many, many ears for people to start saying, hold up a second. And one little thing I want to point out, we're starting the conversation in our 40s. This conversation needs to be heard by women in their 30s because that's where the preparation really begins. You know, and hopefully we can get there.
I love how you mentioned the men being the silver fox and we are the old lady. And so I want you to speak a little bit to that aspect of, you know, I love how in our culture we have begun, I don't know if we're taking it from our North American counterparts, but we have begun to recognize the importance of taking care of ourselves, you know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how we can help ourselves in that regard to combat this whole perimenopause when we may begin to feel a little bit unattractive or, you know, our self-esteem is not where it used to be.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jackie. Let me say something. Let's think about, for example, I don't know about you, but I'll say this. I think women, we have been taught to live in shame for a long time. We've been taught to live in shame about our sexuality. You know, like, for example, the woman shouldn't necessarily be the one coming on to the man. When we got to the stage of having our cycle, we were taught shame. So if you think about each phase of our lives, we were living in that space of, oh, maybe I can't talk about this. I remember in high school when I had my cycle, I would hide my sanitary napkin. Shout out to my girl, you know, her Flo, who is Shelly, who, you know, brought that exposure. And I remember when Shelly started doing it, you know, people were scoffing at her for doing that, right? If you guys don't know about it, it's a foundation in Jamaica for international audience. But, you know, so coming back to perimenopause, at this stage of our lives, if we look at each phase and the shame that we've carried, now is the time, ladies, to really say, I am going to step outside of that because this is almost like a do or die situation, right? It's now or never. This is I don't want to say the final hurrah, but this is a space where you get to redefine yourself. So how do we do that? One, first of all, I always say seek professional help, right? And it's not just a nutritionist. You can get a trainer, you can get a therapist. You know, it's all about connecting. It's also finding community, right? This is what we're doing. Beyond Woman, I mean, kudos. You guys are always trailblazing on bringing those hot topics, finding that community and not just shying away and thinking, I am going through this alone. There are 65 million women in the United States of America who are either in perimenopause or going through menopause. Okay. So when you think about it, once you're in your 40s, you're guaranteed that you're in that phase of life. Don't think about it as a dirty topic. It's not, right? So how do we now help ourselves? So we find a therapist, we find a nutritionist, we find that person who is an expert. There's materials out there for us to read. Don't just sit down and take whatever symptoms you're feeling and sulk away. I promise you there's another woman that has unlocked that code and you can reach out to get that help. I'm a big fan of what we put into our bodies, and we can talk a little bit more about that. I'm a big fan of exercise. To me, one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself when you're in perimenopause is to start touching those weights. Do not be afraid of touching, doing some strength training. That is going to be a game changer in terms of how your body looks, how you feel, because when you look better, you feel better, right?
Exactly. Awesome. But you're touching on some of the things that we can do. And I wouldn't mind if you delve a little bit more into that aspect of the conversation at this point.
All right.
So some of the other things. So you're talking about exercising. And before you answer, I'm always thinking about the woman who is not in a position to afford certain things. You know, how can we simplify ways in which she can take care of herself? Maybe she cannot afford a trainer. Maybe she can't afford someone like you, unfortunately, but how can that woman do better for herself then?
All right. So if we think about the perimenopausal woman, what is going to be happening to her, right? So like I said, there are a myriad of different things that's going to be happening in your body. Everybody's symptoms manifest differently. The one thing that we do know is that food plays a very pivotal role, right? So you may not be able to afford a trainer. You may not be able to afford some of these different things, right? Excuse me. But at the end of the day, there are some things that you can definitely do. So for example, starting with the foods on your plate. When you're perimenopausal, you already know that you're going to have some amount of insulin resistance. What do I mean by that? So insulin is another hormone, right? And that is going to help your body to take that glucose. Anything that you eat that breaks down in sugar, think about insulin like that key for the lock. Okay. when you eat certain things, your body is going to go crazy and it's going to say, hey, if when you're perimenopausal, right? And particularly if you're consuming like too much sugary foods and things like that. So for the woman who can't afford a nutritionist, who can't afford to go to a trainer, you can start with the basics on your plate to know that, hey, these are some of the things that could potentially happen to me. So therefore, I need to now look at what I'm eating on my plate, right? So don't bother with the fast foods, prepare your own foods. Make sure that you're eating a substantial amount of protein. Make sure that you cut back on your carbohydrates. So if you used to eat 2 starchy dumplings, 3 fingers of banana, cut it in half. Whatever you were doing before, cut it in half and increase your protein intake, right? If you're plant-based, God help you, but that's a whole other conversation. and I know I'm gonna come on the flack for this because I was a big advocate for vegan and vegetarian, and I still am.
Yes, I don't understand. I don't understand that statement.
I love it. I love it. I love it. But here's the thing, right? Diets, as I learned, when I was doing my master's degrees, is like similar to if you go to the doctor and they give you some kind of tablet, right? In other words, diets are therapeutic to the stage of life that you're in. So, for example, if somebody is eating a vegan diet and they don't understand how to make sure they're eating the right amount of plant-based proteins, right, and make sure that it's balanced, you are going to find yourself eating way too much carbohydrates. And let me tell you something, for that perimenopausal woman, the easiest way to shift your body composition is reducing that carbohydrates, even sometimes cycling, meaning not eating carbohydrates on one particular day, well, the starchy ones, because fruits and vegetables are carbs. Let me be clear about that, right? Those are your largest sources of carbohydrates, but like the pastas, the white bread, the crackers, all the things that in our Caribbean culture we tend to eat. Calm yourself down on that, right? So we talk about that in terms of the foods on your plate. And there are also nutraceuticals, basic ones that you want to make sure you get in. So even though you're in the Caribbean, Jackie, I implore people, make sure you check those vitamin D levels because many of us are not getting enough vitamin D, right? So that's one of the things that you want to supplement with. You're going to want to supplement with magnesium, right? And we can get into the different types of magnesiums, but generally speaking, I tell people do a complex and get a magnesium glycinate, which is the one that helps you to sleep, right? And then for whatever else you're missing, you'll have that complex. So we talk about the foods. We have the omegas as well, right? The omega-3 fatty acids, that is great for hormone balancing. So that's another thing that you want to include. And then the bush tea, them that we know in Jamaica, right? So we have all kind of different herbs. I won't get into too much of the herbs right now, but there are different herbs that you can basically apply that helps with like hormone balance, particularly for the liver, things like that. So we cover the food. So now we know that we can do something about the food. Now let's talk about the exercise. You don't have the gym. What can you do in that case? A great thing is walking. So for women over 40, I see this all the time. And if you are this person out there listening, please stop. When you're over 40, those excessive jumping up and down, unless you were a pro athlete from before, then that's different. But if you're somebody that is just starting out, walk. Walking is one of the biggest things that you can do to change your body composition. I highly recommend like a 45-minute walk daily if you want to split it up. I do mine in the morning on my treadmill. If you don't have a treadmill, walk outside. Okay? I mean, if you're going to tell me you can't walk outside because of whatever, then I'm sorry. I don't know what else to tell you.
Right.
Right? Because I know I'm going to get that.
Right. Yes.
Right? Then if you can't walk outside, do some jumping jacks in your living room, like gentle, not too much, or do some squats. YouTube, guys, is free. You can go on YouTube and type in starter, for women over 40 exercise. They're basic things that you can do in your home, right? But you do want that cardiovascular exercise because one of the other things that happens to women in their 40s is hypertension, your triglycerides, your cholesterol goes higher, right? A lot of people see elevated cholesterol when you are in perimenopause. I do want to pause there, pun intended, to say though, don't be scared if if any of those markers go up, because they're actually protective. They're now recognizing that cholesterol is actually protective. Where you have to now become concerned is if you check some other heart markers and then there's inflammation. So, you know what I mean? So going back to the whole exercise thing, we want to make sure that you're getting that exercise. You've eaten the food, so now you're doing the basic 45 minutes. No, when it comes to strength training, you may can't afford a gym, but save some money and buy a couple of weights, 5, 10, 15 pounds, right? And do, make sure you're doing the arms, you're doing your overheads, you're doing your squat with your weights, you're doing your lunges with your weights. Again, there are exercises out there. Why? Because if you are not doing exercise, you're basically cutting off your lifespan, right? Exercise is a great tool. And for those of us who can afford to go to the gym, right? Then you're going to, of course, make sure that you go to the gym and you're using those machines. Ask around. If you can't afford a trainer, at least you're in the gym getting some assistance, right? You must can afford at least one time. When I hear this thing about affordability, Jackie, I get it that there are women that are truly, truly in a state of poverty. But when we look at the majority, we have the weave on, we spend money on other things,
That
but
is
we
true.
never invest in our health, right? I tell people this, I prefer to invest on the front end than on the back end.
Exactly. That's a good point.
You know what I'm saying? And for those who can't afford it, I'm pretty sure that there are resources out there, right? There are local churches, communities, so there's always a resource, guys. Don't just fold your arms and give up. It's a really challenging time, and especially if you if you have another comorbidity, right? Because we don't talk about that yet. If the person had some pre-existing conditions, it only makes it more complicated. And the type 2 diabetes is one that we have to look out for during this period of perimenopause, because like I mentioned, this is where now a lot of women, because they start gaining that belly fat, right? They start to get insulin resistant. So the body is making more insulin, and insulin is that hormone that actually makes you fat. So now they're recognizing that, for example, in my private practice and, some of my colleagues, what they're recognizing is instead of just testing, for example, the typical HbA1c, which is that hemoglobin marker that we use for diabetes, right? Or the other typical diabetes marker, they're also now looking at insulin and saying, okay, just to make sure they understand what level that is at. Because when we control insulin, then we can control the body fat. Okay? And of course, for the mental aspect of it, talk to your girlfriends. If you have girlfriends that are your same age, trust me, they're going through similar things. Okay? And also talking to your partner. I remember when I discovered that I was in perimenopause, I put my husband aside and I said, hey, this is what's going on, because trust me, there were things that I just couldn't understand. Like I would just be, emotionally unstable sometimes. And I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm pleased to say that I'm no longer emotionally unstable, because thank goodness I did the research. I've put it together in the book, and now I have tools to pull back on, right? And I'm also making sure I'm consistent with what I eat. I don't play with my protein anymore. And let me tell you, right? I still don't eat pork. I will never eat pork, right? I don't fool around shellfish, but I do eat everything else, right? Because I recognize at this stage of my life, I'm not playing with my body composition.
I love
And
it. I mean, there's just so much information which leads me to reiterate that this conversation is so important, and other conversations are important as well. I just want to pause to say that women in general, you spoke about the community, how important the community is. And so having this conversation today, and I mean, it will always be available on our podcast platform, but the point is that we cannot have too much conversation about this. And I believe in the rippling effect. You hear it today, decide that I'm going to go form my own community and have these kinds of conversations. You also talk about the exercise. I am challenging a woman who is listening, and maybe she's more off base, she's more into that area. What about getting together a group of women and lending your expertise to help them to develop themselves? And so I'm just encouraging all of us to just play our part, because it is so important for us to begin taking care of ourselves. And when you look around social media and you see a woman who is in her 50s, looking like she's in her 30. That is what we want. We want all of us to be healthy. We want all of us to be strong. And I find that even as we talk about this whole exercise, it helps. It helps in the emotional balance. It's important for us to take charge in any way that we can and help each other. But I wanted to backtrack a little bit because I wanted to ask you this question earlier on. In your experience, what are some of the myths or misconceptions about perimenopause that we need to debunk?
Oh my gosh. Well, myth number one that, it's, how would I say this now? Oh, it's not going to happen to me. Every single woman that is on this planet, once you get into your 40s, you will experience at least one symptom at some point, right? It may be the physical vasomotor symptoms, right? Where you feel the hot flashes. It may be the mental, right? It has to be one of them, but you will experience it. Right? It's a phase of life. And I can't emphasize that enough.
I love that. I love that you put it that way. It is just, and you said it earlier in the conversation.
Yes.
It is one of those things that we definitely will go through.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it bothers me when I hear people talk, because they talk as if it's this strange concept. It's literally a phase. All of us went through puberty at some point. Perimenopause is no different, right? The men go through what you call andropause. So the men have their own thing as well, right? So that's one of the biggest myths that I can think about, that I would say that we will all experience it at some point, right? The other myth is that you have to accept it. This is just what it is. I should say that's actually the biggest myth. You will go to some, God forbid, medical practitioners who will be dismissive and will say, yes, you're in perimenopause. It's natural. Actually, the symptoms that you're experiencing in perimenopause is not natural. What it is that you allowed yourself to do whatever you wanted to do in your 20s and 30s. And when you hit that 40s, it will catch up to you. So I know it sounds contradictory because I say you will go through it. When I say you will go through it, it's because it's a phase of life, right? How you experience it is another story. You understand what I'm saying? So, for example, for myself, I know that I had two things that happened to me. Since then, praise the Lord, I've not had any issues because I've looked at those symptoms. I know what the potential are, and then I have remedied them beforehand. You understand what I'm saying? And this is why I'm imploring women in their 30s, right, to start listening. Us as older women need to be talking to women who are younger so they understand that whatever they do in those times will be the impact. So, for example, alcohol. That is a big no-no in perimenopause. I know people like to say, oh, just a glass of wine. Believe me, alcohol, first of all, shuts down your metabolic processes for like 24 hours, right? If you notice, your body does not handle alcohol the same way it does when you were younger, right? So those are some of the things that I would say, hey, stay away from. When you talk about going back to the whole myth and how medical practitioners treat you, you may be hearing, oh, you just have to accept it. You don't have to accept anything. You don't have to ever have a hot flash. You never have to be drenching in sweat all the time. You never have to feel emotionally imbalanced. There are nutraceuticals for that. There are foods that will help you. So you want to increase, for example, your magnesium, right? You want to eat your nuts and seeds. It all goes back to eating a balanced diet. And I want to be cautioned here by saying a balanced diet for you, Jackie, is going to be a different diet for me. Why?
Oh, wow.
Your height and your weight is going to determine, and your ethnicity and your background and what you're used to eating, and if you have any pre-existing conditions, is going to determine what is good for Jackie versus what's good for Ken Rese. Earlier I mentioned that I have a histamine intolerance. Strawberries are healthy, right? Organic strawberries are healthy. I can't eat them. If I eat them, I break out in hives. Okay? Bananas throw me over the edge. My beloved avocados, I can't eat. So some things, I know it sucks. I mean, I can eat it. I'm going to itch after, right? And I can take something before if I really want to eat it. But, and I have some periods where I can eat it and it doesn't bother me, but I just have to stay in that balance, right? And it's the same thing when we talk about what women have to go through in terms of when we talk about the myths and how you navigate that. So they will tell you you have to accept it. I could have accepted that, well, I'm histamine intolerant and just live on a very skinny diet. What I did was I got reset and I'm able to eat 90% of the stuff that I wasn't able to eat without adverse effects, right? So as you traverse this period of your life, don't allow anybody to tell you, oh, just accept the symptoms. Like you mentioned, exercise is powerful. We know that the foods that we're going to eat, we know that the nutraceuticals, but what I would recommend is a blueprint for you. Right. So one of the things I actually want to do, Jackie, and maybe we can work this out. I'm thinking about doing like a group class for women, particularly in Jamaica. I'll figure out the sign on and think we can have a conversation about that because, I really want to have women in Jamaica being a little, or I should say in the Caribbean, right? Understand that there are resources out there. If they can't do like a one-on-one, we can still present a group format to them so that they can at least get the information on hand, right? And reading, the information is out there, guys. All of us have cell phones. We're watching this right now. Trust me, you can still do your own research. You're not going to know everything all at once, but, open your minds to it.
I love it. I love it. But I need to correct you. I'm not in Jamaica. I'm in the Bahamas. That's where.
Oh, you're in the Bahamas? As it came out of my mouth, I'm like, is she still,
But that's fine. Listen, I represent the Caribbean.
I should be coming to the Bahamas soon, too.
Huh?
I should be coming to the Bahamas soon. So.
Oh, nice. Let's connect when you do.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you mentioned that we don't have to go through it.
Yes.
Or there are ways that can help us to manage the whole process better. And I mean, as we talk more, I realize how big this thing is. It's not a simple thing, and so I am happy to also hear you say you'd be open to like a group. So we'll talk about that and see if we can make that kind of arrangement, because I believe that even though we're having this conversation, there are so many layers to it that women can still benefit from. So we're definitely going to have to talk about that. I want to touch a little bit on our male counterparts. How can they support us? We know that you just mentioned that they go through what you said, they go through
andropause. Yes.
But without even thinking about it, we as women, we're always supporting them. How can they support us in this journey? Because I'm pretty sure we have some men listening in.
Yes. Jackie, I feel like you read my book because the questions you're asking me are just so it's literally.
But I'm pretty sure your book delves deeper, so we'll encourage all the listeners to go and get your book.
I literally just went back in the thing because I'm like, I know I covered this in the book, but it's so interesting. Well, one of the things that I think the first support is being patient when it comes to sex. Right? I think a lot of men, when their wife get to that stage, instead of, their partners get to that stage, instead of being kind about it, the first thing is to accuse people of either cheating or saying, you no longer desire me, arguing instead of saying, babe, talk to me, what's going on, right? But I think the women actually have an advantage where they can actually lead the conversation, like I mentioned earlier. So, and not just the men in terms of that you're intimate with, but just in general, your community, right? So for example, getting the family together, having a conversation and saying, hey, I realize that, my body's changing. It's, these things are impacting me. If I seem a little off sometimes, this is what's going on. I'm working through it. Having that conversation with your partner in particular can then help that person to support you, right? So when you say, hey, I need some downtime, or, even as it comes to intimacy, like how does that shift, that's a little bit more personal. We'll get into that in a more intimate group. But, there are lots of things that you can do when it comes to having that conversation with that partner and even your wider community so that they understand what you're going through. And I've seen this being effective with quite a few of my patients that I work with where, I give them that strategy, they talk to the partner, it shifts certain things, and also to giving them things that will help sexual health, right? So for women, and even if you're not in perimenopause, believe it or not, women should actually start lubricating themselves, right? Because it helps your skin to maintain that integrity over time. And a quick tip here, guys, coconut oil.
What is?
Coconut oil in a glass bottle, cold press, extra virgin is your best friend, right? I lather my entire body in it. I smell like coconut oil all the time, right? It's so good for your skin, but particularly for your intimate area, because a lot of women too get a lot of infections during this time because of that dryness that they feel. So the coconut oil will be great, and that will also help with your intimacy with your partner, right? So having those conversations, I know I kind of digressed a little bit, but I wanted to throw that in. But having those in conversations will really help them to actually help you, right? Because you can't, closed mouths don't get fed. They're
Absolutely.
not leaders, right? So, and if you don't know how to do it, you can always good old chat GPT, right? Or say, I want to have this conversation, da, 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 da. Tell me how to say it without looking stupid. Or write a note, send a text. Some people are shy, so there are different ways that you can go about having that conversation with your partner.
I love it. I love it. And it's so funny. You mentioned ChatGPT because I was talking to another woman, and she was saying to me that, boy, I think when we get into our 40s to the 50s, lives get a little bit more challenging for us, and we're not so able to maneuver all of the different things that we're going through. So we get overwhelmed. So she was saying to me that, I go to ChatGPT and I ask ChatGPT certain questions and how can I deal with this? And like ChatGPT is her psychiatrist, or her psychologist. And I'm like, really? So let me ask you a question. Did you put your name? Does this, can this lead back to you? Because it's going on the internet, but apparently that is a thing. I didn't know.
Definitely nothing. And I love the fact that you said that part though, because, I love to say there's a so and so if it's about myself, but trust me, AI, they know it's you. They're matching your patterns. I want to backtrack a little bit, Jackie, because when you asked me about the myths earlier, I covered quite a few, and I just want to bring back two more because it is like this is another thing, brain fog. You don't remember everything, right? So this is why you have to document. So I just want to read a little excerpt here. So one of the myths that I mentioned, and I think you like this one, every woman's experience of perimenopause is unique. Some women have intense symptoms while others have very mild or no symptoms at all. Right? The type, severity, duration of symptoms like hot flashes, mood swings, and sleep disturbance vary greatly between individuals. Right? So that's one of the biggest myths that I want to share. For example, while one woman might experience severe night sweats, another might only notice a minor change in her menstrual cycle, which, by the way, we didn't talk about. That's a huge thing. The erratic menstrual cycle, the unpredictability. And ladies, you can still get pregnant, okay? So, in fact, a lot of women have their oopsies during this time because of the instability of the menstrual cycle. Another myth is that it's purely physical, and we kind of covered that earlier. It's not purely physical because, again, we know that a lot of women go through the mental issues. And one thing that we didn't really touch on, and maybe this is a whole conversation by itself, is hormone therapy is the only solution. A lot of women think that they can only get HRT or BHRT, which is more the bioidentical hormones. There are other things that you can do, adjunct therapies, right, that will help to keep your body in balance. My take on it is if you need it, take it. Don't let the fear of what they tell you about cancers and all of that. That's actually a whole myth by itself. There's a whole book exposing that, how the doctor who had actually started that whole thing about HRT and cancers was basically, it was flawed research. And a lot of women are suffering when they could get a tiny little patch on their bikini area, some progesterone at night, you sleep better. I'm a big advocate for that balance. So if that's something that you're considering, talk to your doctor about it. Don't be afraid, but it's not the only solution.
But I guess like with everything in life, there's just a balance, and it is what is good for you and what sits well with you, But
Yes.
let me tell you, like I said, this is just us adding our voice to the whole perimenopause arena. And I know that this is just a tip of the iceberg, so to speak. There's just so much more that we can dive into based on what I'm getting from you. You know, you have to stop yourself.
Yes,
And
yes,
so it is important, like I said before, for us to continue the conversation. As you mentioned earlier, information is out there on the internet. You can take charge of your own circumstance and go and do the research. You can get connected to someone like Rese. And of course, we will put your information in the details that we will have attached to this podcast where women can get in touch with you. I don't know if you do virtual consultation.
I only do virtual. I have clients as far as Japan.
Oh, wow.
I
The
have clients
beauty.
all Germany, all over the globe. Of course, the predominantly here in the United States. For some states that I'm licensed in to take insurance and all of that, and then there are people who I have what I call my cash paid clients. So I do a variety, but I only do online, and of course I do speaking engagements as per usual. So.
I love it. Like I said, the information is out there, whether we're talking to Reese or we're talking to somebody else, but it is so important for us to get educated about this matter so that we can take more control over our lives. I want to ask you a final question, Reese, and then once you answer, you can also add your final thoughts. So speak to the woman, whatever it is that you want to share with them additionally. We did a conversation not so long ago on mental health. And so I want you to talk about that aspect of perimenopause and our mental health. We probably touched it, but I would like for you to just add a little bit more how we should take care of our mental health during this process, how important it is.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you kind of circled back on it. What I'm finding is a lot of us are in denial about our mental state and what it does to us, right? Because again, estrogen as a hormone or the different hormones that interplays, right? When those hormones become erratic, many of us become very unstable in our emotions. Some of us have suicidal ideation. Some of us have extreme anxiety, right? Because our bodies are so depleted. And it begins to manifest in different ways, not wanting to leave your home, just how you interact, every day is like a, dark cloud over your head, right? And here's the thing, here's the tricky part about that. So you remember what I talked about going to the orthopedic surgeon and, them just looking at it as a specific thing. It's the same thing. If you go to a mental health practitioner and you don't weave into the fact that the whole space of perimenopause, they may look at it in isolation. And the truth is, a lot of the mental issues, and I know people are going to come for me for this, but I'm going to say many of the issues that we have when it comes to mental actually start on a physiological, barring a traumatic event. Let me say that again. So a lot of it is on a physiological level, meaning there's a chemical imbalance in the body, right? And when we get the right combination, that is why when you take, for example, certain medications that they use for depression, it's usually to monitor a chemical imbalance in the body, right? So to modulate that, I should say. So what I would say to anybody that's going through any kind of mental issue is still address the food, still address the exercise, right? And of course, when it comes to do the therapy, but make sure you're connecting the dots. Make sure you're documenting when did this begin, what are some of the things that I notice I do when this is happening. Journaling, all of those things will also help you to put together that map. With my patients, Jackie, I have a system that I use, right? Every patient they have a whole journaling system to document their food, document their their emotions, everything that's going on. Because when we go back, I am now able to assess all the pieces, right? Because you can say, okay, did you exercise on this day? What was going on during that period that you weren't able to have that balance? My final thoughts to women is this, right? Whether you are struggling with a budget, whether you have the budget, whatever it is, start with the basics by being honest with yourself. I feel like a lot of times, many of us, we adorn our physical selves, and that's beautiful. I like to adorn myself. I like nice things and jewelry and all of that. But think about your internal. Think about what it is, what does the next phase of my life look like? What do I want it to be like? And then you put your energy towards that. Because let me tell you something, no job, right? I had to step away from a certain environment because I realized that it doesn't matter how much money you're making if you're unhappy in that space. Okay? So starting by taking care of yourself, it doesn't matter how, I'm telling you, I was a senior VP, right? My last job. So you can imagine how much money I was making there, right? And yes, I miss that lovely paycheck, but you know what? I'm the happiest I've ever been being in this space and impacting people's lives. This is the time, ladies, when you should have put in the work so that you're now in a purpose-driven setting, right? Because a lot of us, when we get, that's why you have midlife crisis, right? When
I
you
love
get to
that.
the stage of life, right? You're blowing in the wind. Take a pause. If this is you, you don't need a new year to start. This is your new year today. Go and write down all the things, do a brain dump, finances, relationship, health, right? And start to put them in, or, organize them and start to say, okay, where's my low hanging fruit? What can I start with? I always say start with at least the food. I mean, I start with prayer, but it's not everybody's thing, although I encourage it to be everybody's thing. Start with a prayer and start with a food. If you start to make those small changes in your diet and your exercise and being disciplined, everything else will follow, because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
I
That's
love it.
my final take.
I love it. I love it. This is a platform that is founded on Ephesians 3:20. So we're spiritually grounded. And I should have asked for yourself, what have you found that the fact that you're grounded in your spirituality, how has that helped you in your journey?
Thank you so much for asking that, Jackie. Well, let me tell you something. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life when it came to spirituality. So I want to be very clear. Christ, Jesus, Jesus alone, right? So when it comes to getting up in the mornings, even this morning, I said, God, what will you have me do today? And I stopped to listen, to hear. I love to go to nature and pray. I love to read my Bible. Like right now, I'm doing a 365-day plan on a Bible app, and that has kept me grounded. I'm actually still in Exodus, trudging along. I should have been further along, but I'm still in Exodus. And what that has helped me to do, because sometimes I'm like, God, is this even applicable to today? But what I'm
Right.
realizing is that people are people, and the examples that are in the Bible, is basically kind of showing me how people were traversing in that time. It may not specifically relate to perimenopause, but certainly the discipline of getting up every single day, and doing what I'm doing has really kind of kept me grounded. And even on the times when I felt like, oh my God, what is this? When I couldn't figure out, for example, the pain in my hip. I had that pain for 2 years. And, I couldn't figure out, I was still cycling, doing all the things, but I had that pain, could not figure out what was going on until finally, I figured it out. And that was just being disciplined, continuous prayer, continuously seeking after God, saying, hey, Lord, what do I do today? And so I would say that is my first go-to for everything, and then adding those small steps on top of each other. Because listen, if you lack discipline, you're going to go through perimenopause in a wicked, wicked way. Trust and believe that. Because it requires discipline at this stage.
I had written that down somewhere on my notes, get disciplined. I think it related to, when you were talking about the exercise and how we eat, because, in the Caribbean, we love our food, right?
Oh
And
boy,
we
the
love our
start is
place
tough.
food,
Yes.
right? And so I'm happy that you mentioned the whole matter of us being disciplined about our journey and what a big difference that can make. And also the spiritual input, because I believe that without God, I don't know who are we. Listen, it has been a beautiful conversation. A little bit, I don't want to use the word overwhelming, but overwhelming in that I recognize that there is just so much more to this topic. It's not a surface topic. It's one that you have to deep dive into. And so I'm happy that you said yes and that we were able to talk a little bit about it. And I'm really hoping that we can connect further on our platform, to make the conversation ongoing and to make more information available. And of course, like I said before, I will include your information and how, our community can get in touch with you. And so I just want to thank you, Rese, for your time all the way. What's the weather like in Atlanta? You said Atlanta, right?
Yes, it's actually cold. So I don't know. It's been crazy. One day it's 30 degrees. It went up to, I think it's probably 40 something right now as we speak. It's supposed to go up into the 70s this week, but it's just been doing a little dance. So it's been a little chilly.
Hasn't settled down as yet. Spring
I
is
want
on
to be
its
in the
way.
Bahamas where it's nice and warm and sunny.
Listen, I think we're in the 60s today. I'm not 100% sure, but we have a lot of wind, and when the wind comes,
Yes.
it gets a little bit cold. So we're not quite in the warm season. I can't run out to the beach if I want to.
Oh,
Not
no.
yet. But thank you again so much, Rese, for connecting with us and for us having this conversation and enlightening our audience, empowering them through education about perimenopause and how it affects the Caribbean woman. And we'll talk soon. We'll connect.
Absolutely.
All right. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Beyond Woman podcast. I hope you're leaving feeling inspired and ready to take action. Remember, you are capable of so much more than you think. Keep pushing those boundaries, keep learning, and keep believing in your limitless potential. We want to stay connected with you, so be sure to follow us on social media at The Beyond Woman magazine for daily inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, and to join our growing community of empowered women. Visit us at www.thebeyondwomanmag.com and www.thebeyondwoman.com, where you will find more resources and articles to support you in your journey. Sign up for our newsletters and be the first to know about our exclusive events and for more opportunities to connect. To all my Caribbean sisters, let's lift each other up. Share this episode with the women in your life who need to hear this message, and let's continue to build this powerful network together. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on this app. Your support helps us to reach more women. Thank you for being part of the Beyond Woman movement. Keep shining, keep growing, and keep living your extraordinary life.